Can you tell me a little bit about your work with UCLan and how the collaboration with In Certain Places came about?
Sure. I'm Rod Dubrow-Marshall. I'm Pro-Vice Chancellor at the university, and I work closely with Preston City Council and with a number of other community arts organisations, as well as, of course, with Charles Quick and other colleagues in art design performance and in certain places. And together we're really trying to grow connections across the city. I work in partnership to create things like Harris Flights. And so this is really the culmination of a lot of work, particularly by Charles and others, but also I've tried to support where I can, bringing together those different organisations within the city. So that we can kind of pool our resources, not just financial resources, but also, importantly, the sort of creative pool of talent that exists, both in the university, at the Harris, but also more widely in all the independent organisations. So I really enjoy that work, trying to build those links, and of course Harris Flights is a great example of that in practice.
How long have you been aware of the flights? Like, how long have discussions been going on for?
Probably a couple of years. I can't pinpoint it directly, but I remember Charles Quick mentioning it to me very early on in his thoughts. I know he'd been talking for years about trying to build steps onto the front of the Harris, and indeed there was also the rumour or myth that originally that was the design that the Harris was meant to have. So right from the beginning you could say, although I should say I've been at UCLan 3 years, which feels like a long time for all the right reasons, but I know Charles has obviously been working in the city for a lot longer than that and has been talking to lots of people for a long time about this.
The design for Harris Flights features a performance space for community groups as well as professional performers and students from UCLan. What are some of the benefits of this, in your opinion?
Well, Preston City Centre doesn't have a public performance space like this. Obviously it's a massive addition to the city to have that space that's freely available, that's freely bookable, that artists of all different kinds can use, and I think it's really transformed that part of Preston City Centre in the time it's been up and hopefully for the time that it remains. So I think it's great there's that kind of open air auditorium where people can come perform and test out and experiment and be creative. And of course there are venues within Preston where you can do that. There's different theatres, we have performance spaces here, but there's kind of something different and unique about doing that outside, about doing it on the flag market, and of course with the backdrop of the Harris. So I think it's a very special space, and I know from talking to some people who've already been on the steps, clearly there's a clamour for that space to happen more often.
Can you tell me about some of the featured acts or events?
Well, I saw Ludus Dance taking part and performing, or a class, a dance class taking place on the steps last week, and it really struck me that this was a really great place to practice dance routines. I saw the community choir perform at the opening, and these are real examples of organisations that already are doing a lot of creative things in Preston or in wider county, but they're really enjoying the fact that this is an elevated space, that it looks out across the city, and that it's a freely available space for them. So I think it's been a rich variety of acts that Charles and colleagues from Preston City Council have programmed, and it's really good. I met some of the poets that will be performing there, and of course we're bringing the Guild time capsule up the steps tomorrow, that's Saturday 24th of August. So it's being used in a whole variety of ways, and that's really great, I think.
That leads on to my next question. What do you hope that the audience and the city of Preston will take away from the flights?
I think they'll take away the fact that Preston really is a hotbed of creativity, that there's an awful lot and a diverse range of creative talent in the city, and that Harris Flights has brought it together in one place, and that it's displaying that rich panoply of different events and talent on display, and that's something that needs to be captured and tapped in the future, and we need to think of ways to work together more in a partnership to try and support all of that. But I think it really helps, like with the Guild last year, to put Preston on the map as being potentially a hub for that kind of artistic work, but also hopefully a magnet for other artists to come to the city and to display and to perform their work here.
There has been a lot of debate locally about the navigation of the museum. Do you think that the Harris Flights project will encourage non-museum goers and new audiences to enter the building?
I'm sure it's right that having steps straight up into the museum encourages more people to come in to the museum. It's something about the steps, it makes you look at the museum more than just having the wall coming down in front of it. And you're right, I know there's also talk of, should the steps at the side be opened up so that people can walk up directly into the first floor, and I would welcome that if that was possible. But the other thing is that I think museums, and this is not a criticism of the Harris, but museums can have the reputation as being rather closed environments, and to a certain extent they have to be, because they have to protect their works of art. But at the same time, it's really great when something demonstrates to the people of a city that their museum is open to them and that they can get to it really easily. And I think that democratisation of art, which is what public art can all be about, of course, is really important, and I'm sure is encouraging more people to come, as well as the fact, of course, that one of the byproducts has been extended opening hours of the Harris to go alongside it, which is really great as well. And I think the more that we can do that kind of thing, also the possibilities are that through voluntary endeavour, through other people being involved in helping to support the Harris, maybe we can continue to extend its opening hours and indeed think of other ways we can encourage more people to come in and enjoy it.
Do you think that the project will encourage debate about long-term fixtures and changes to the city?
I'm sure it will. I've already met people who have said that they wish the Harris Flights steps were staying permanently, and that the transformation of the city centre that it's bringing about is something that could happen all the time. So I think it will engender a debate about how do we use that really great space in the middle of the city with the Harris, with the cenotaph, with the town hall next to it and everything. How do we use that space to encourage more people to come into the city centre? And in a sense, this is a great example of how you can create a really active and dynamic public performing space. There have been other things on there, other projects, and we can have a debate. I'm sure there'll be a lot more ideas for ways in which we can use that space in that way.
What regenerative effects, if any, do you think the project might produce?
Well, I think it brings people into the city, which is always good. I think it also brings potentially artists and creative talent into the city. It also means that from the university point of view, that students on creative arts programmes are having the opportunity to showcase what they're doing to a wider audience. All of that's important because that hopefully then means that Preston is more of a magnet for capital, that people are interested in investing not only their money but also their time and their creative talent in projects within the city. So I think potentially it can have a regenerative effect in that sense. Physically, of course, as well, it's an area that much of the time is empty, and therefore we have, through this project, completely changed that around and turned it into a space that's full of activity and that people are coming to a lot more than normal. So for a temporary period, the city centre is being regenerated. The real question is how to build on that more permanently, of course.
What are your thoughts on the creative community in Preston and within UCLan?
Well, I've lived and worked in Preston now for 3 years, and I've been amazed at the rich diversity of creative talent, both at the university and in the wider city. I was kind of blessed, if you like, to arrive here the year before, or a couple of years before the Guild, and I was really struck by how many of our students and staff were actively involved in that, but also the wide range of other creative organisations and people in the city who were working with them. And that meant that both Guild Fortnight but the whole Guild year, I think, was a wonderful advert for a city that has grown in its confidence and in its array of talent and output over the years. I think the university plays an important part in that, and I'm really excited about events that we can put together like Harris Flights that are, if you like, almost like a Guild legacy that build on that array of talent that was displayed during the Guild and take it forward further. So I think it's great, the work that's done at the university and the city, and I think we need to think of ways to shout louder about that and to put Preston more on the map as being a potential centre of excellence for creative arts within the UK and the wider world. But we're not quite there yet. I mean, I think Preston is still a undiscovered gem for most of the people of the UK, so there really is a job of work of how we can, you know, almost publicise things like the Guild and Harris flights to a much wider audience.
I agree with what you were saying. Manchester has its international festival.
Absolutely.
And Liverpool has a biennial.
Yeah.
Lastly, do you think that the project will help gain a national profile for the city in any way?
Well, I think it's, I hesitate to say unique, but it's an almost unique project in terms of the physicality of the steps on the front of the museum. And certainly the openness with which that's been done, you know, attracting a whole array of different artists is also a very interesting creative approach. So I really hope that it will attract national media attention. But as I say, I think we do need to think about ways in which something like Harris Flights each year or other types of festivals could start to adopt the sort of biannual or annual festival approach of other cities, so that gradually over time national media outlets, even the BBC, start to realise that Preston is somewhere that should be taken seriously. And I remember we had, before the Guild, an event for the BBC, an Insight Day in the Harris, which was great. A lot of the new staff from the BBC who were coming to work at Media City came over. And some of them had actually worked in Manchester for years, of course, with the BBC over there. But it was surprising that some of them had never come to Preston. They lived and worked in Manchester, but they'd never come to the city of Preston. And so Preston was a real mystery to them, and no doubt the wealth of artistic talent in the city likewise was something that really wasn't on their radar. So I think, if you take the radar analogy, this is a big blip on the radar screen, and hopefully we can create more big blips on the radar screen in the future.